Here we go.
I'm back. They let me out of jail. You let me out of jail, son. Mr. A said, I'm doing the show without you. You talked too much last week.
Yo, speaking of which, I always go back and watch our work. And I was watching the show again, and I was like, wow, man, this is, having those guys on, salute to Louis Lopez and Frank Rodriguez, man. Those guys, they're incredible. And when I say incredible, I mean their person, who they are as people, right? Super humble, always ready to reach back and give it up, pause. And just watching it all unfold, like seeing you host for the first time, how they were responding, their answers, the things that they brought to the table was just amazing. And I enjoy being in the room with those guys and just talking, right? Because it's like a wealth of information.
It's like barbershop talk, but with knowledge. Not just BSing.
Yeah, like real world experience, right? These guys have been through the gamut to reach the MLB. So I really respect them and appreciate them giving up their time, man. But you did an awesome job, man. First time out the gate. Man.
Appreciate it. Like I said, I thank you, for the opportunity. We're here, we working, and I told you the 1 year anniversary I would do it, but we did it sooner. Mm-hmm. And I hit you, and I told our brother Dom from There Goes the Neighborhood. I appreciate what you guys do running the shows, man. It's not easy, coming in a little hot, but we get there.
Of course, man. This it's part of the growth.
Yes.
Salute to the regular schmegular Miss Angelica Reyes all the way up in Ohio. To our brother Dom, Tasty Dom 66. We see you, brother. Gonna be here soon. And a returning guest, or not guest, but follower of the show, friend to the show, Mr. Frank Coco Sr. What's going on?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
What's
man.
going on, everybody? Thanks for coming.
Man,
be a good one tonight.
So tonight, man, this is pretty deep, I think, for me, because to have somebody with this type of experience, and resume, if you would,
Speaking of knowledge.
Yeah, right? Speaking of knowledge, Mark Healey is the truth. He's a homegrown guy. He's from Brooklyn, our part of town. And he's been working at this for many, many years. And I think, to see somebody like that give their time and give of themselves, man, you definitely just got to give it up, man.
Yes. I'm thankful at the set for him giving his time up for sure, and sharing some knowledge, This world is the set offers knowledge, so it's free. You guys want to soak it in, that's up to you.
Yeah, so salute to listen, ladies and gentlemen, we have all different types of people from all different walks of life. And this gentleman that I have his comment posted on, Mr. Mark Manuel, was on our cannabis episode. And this gentleman is doing great work down in Florida. And if you haven't seen that episode, it's him and Swan, who is a chef. He cooks with cannabis. They came onto the show and they really they
bring them back.
Yeah, for sure. But salute to Mark Manuel, and we see you, all the work that you're doing now, man. Continue to do what you do, and we definitely got to revisit that conversation. But tonight, again, it's all about Mr. Mark Healey from Brooklyn. He is a sports writer, commentator, and now author. He has an amazing book out, which I incidentally just ordered.
Yeah, amazing. Just the concept of it too is. I try to do just people that I've watched, my favorite all-time list, and it was like, damn, like how did I leave this guy out? Or how did I leave that guy out? So we'll get into that, when it gets.
Yeah, man. I think the beautiful thing about it is it gives an in-depth look and gives you items and details that you probably, like you said, you forget about or you miss, right? And it brings you back. But his passion for the game, I think, is unmatched. The only person I know in my lifetime is my partner here that just eats, breathes sports, along to the big bro, Ariel Torres. and Mr. Joseph Estrella, of course. So it'll be an interesting conversation. I hope everybody is strapped in and is ready for this one. So without further ado, we're going to run this track. You ready, Sal?
Let's run the track.
Let's go. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Mr. A, with my partner,
Sally Sassong in the building.
And this is the set 6145. Tonight, from Brooklyn, Mr. Mark Healey, author, sports commentator, and all-around good guy. He's coming on to the show tonight. We're going to talk about all things sports. And, maybe we'll take a turn here or two with some social items or whatever, but tonight it's all about Mr. Mark Healey.
Real quick, my man Avi and this post your the store, Avi. That's he got a shop out in Long Island, got the sneakers, got the jerseys, got the hats. Come check them.
I got a better one. Avi, why don't you post the store information, yes, but also send us the information at Gmail. The set 6145 at gmail.com. And we'll promote your store here on the show. I think that's even better for you, brother.
Took care of my boys. We went there, got the Air Force Ones.
Oof.
Good looking out there, boy.
Okay. Good evening to our brother, Mr. James Morales. We see you.
Incidentally, mode. There you go.
Oh, there it is. Incidentally, sort of to switch gears, Mr. James Morales' son has a business that he started. James, you should put that up in the room as well so we could promote for him.
Yes, sir.
Interesting concept. All about living that vegetarian life, eating healthy. So, we ready to get this thing started?
Let's go.
All right. Ooh, I just zoomed. Oh, man. I just caught a little technical difficulty right there. Working with this new format, man, is really weird, but we make it work. All right, here we go. Let me pull up this banner. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the set welcomes Brooklyn's own Mr. Mark Healey, who's sipping his coffee or tea.
I'm good.
Mr. Mark, how are you? Good evening.
I'm great, Sully, and Mr. A. Thank you so much for inviting me to the set.
Of course,
I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. We appreciate your time for sure.
Really, Mr. I'm going to call you Mark. I'm sorry to be so formal. I'm trying to be respectful, but let's be comfortable.
I appreciate it.
So, Mark, you're a Brooklyn guy just like we are.
Right.
So where does the journey start for you as far as the love of sports, and then how does it evolve into becoming a writer and or commentator?
Well, that's a great question. It all started with my dad, Ronnie. He is everybody. First of all, he looks exactly like Terry Collins.
Oh, wow.
No joke. I mean, he looks just like him. When we'll talk about it later when we talk about some other stuff that's kicking around. Mm-hmm. But basically, my dad is the guy that really gave me the love of the game.
Okay.
And he was a huge Brooklyn Dodger fan growing up. He, grew up in the shadows of Ebbets Field. So he was, he was a poor kid. He, his basically was on his own when he was 12. And, he was at St. Vincent's Home for Boys. And, that was his life. That's what he loved to do. He loved to play sports and go see the Brooklyn Dodgers. So when I came, my two older brothers, they kind of sort of like sports, but I was the first one to really take to it.
Okay.
So he was just, that was it, that I was going to be a sports guy, but I took to it and I loved it. And that was really the beginning of the journey. I grew up in Flatbush on East 39th Street.
Oh, wow.
All my boys were, sports guys. So that's all we did. We played ball. We argued about sports. We played sports, whether it was, wiffle ball or, going to Farragut Park and playing hoops or roller hockey or very rough two-hand touch in the street.
Yeah, we know about
that. That's what we did, And so that really is where it all started, and I think that because my dad always had the year, like he had every Met yearbook from 1962 on, and I would just read them from cover to cover, so I wanted to know when I'm into something, I got to know everything about it, and that is just a natural, call it a curiosity, call it just wanting to show off my knowledge to other people. It's probably more that than anything
The
else.
brain weighs 8 pounds. You're the Jerry Maguire kid.
So, it just was like one of those things, in my neighborhood, you had to know your team, so if you were wearing a Met cap or a jersey or a whatever, and you didn't know like who your squad was.
Right.
And that was, I even write about this in the book. I mean, that was, if you probably lost your hat, if
Wow.
if you didn't, have
No
the knowledge
bandwagons.
of the team, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, so that's where it all started for me, just growing up, my dad, my friends, and it was just a passion that has never been quenched.
So, Mark, growing up in Flatbush, right? I always, I worked that area, and I used to always try to picture the stadium. And so, did your dad ever tell you like those stories about the stadium, like how it just
Sure,
like, yeah?
absolutely.
Can you walk us through some of that, like maybe the feelings of the stadium just being like down Flatbush Avenue? Is that got to be insane?
Well, you got to understand, for him, that was kind of like his second home. Back then, you did anything you could to get the 50 cents to go sit in the bleacher seats. But he'd also go to the Polo Grounds too, and go see the New York Giants. And so he always talked about that. Some people love numbers, right? Some people love the intricacies of the game, on the analytic side of things. But I grew up listening to the stories. I grew up listening to the myths. I grew up listening to my dad telling this great story about how he got Willie Mays' autograph and didn't even know who he was.
Wow.
Because it was 1951. That's in the book too. Like stories like that. I incorporated a lot of those stories into the book because they're great stories.
Right.
And that's how I grew to love the game, because of those stories, because of the way that he described sitting in the bleacher seats at Ebbets Field, the way he described, wanting to go, thinking about it all day, talking about the first time he saw Jackie Robinson, talking about, Pee Wee Reese, and he tells this story about how everybody would sit in the bleachers waiting after Duke Snyder would be shagging flies, and that at the end of him shagging flies, that he would always throw a ball over his head, behind his head, to the kids in the bleachers, and talking about the anticipation, is Duke going to throw me a ball? I mean, that's right. The kind of stuff that when you're a kid, you're either going to be like, yeah, that's great, I got to go play video games, or you're like, oh my God, tell me another story.
Right.
And my dad's a great storyteller. So
kids now are texting during that.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So yeah, he would tell a lot of those stories.
Do you, in writing these stories or writing your book, Gotham Baseball, do you still get the feeling, because I know as we get older, things start to fade from us, right? The memories, we remember them, but the feeling is it still the same? Do you still get the nostalgia and being in that moment when you tell these stories?
Absolutely.
Wow.
For me, I mean, look, trust me, there's a lot of stuff I've forgotten, but but there's a lot of stuff that, it's still there. It's so visceral,
Right.
You remember smells. You remember, I remember, when Lee Mazzilli was traded at some point. He wasn't traded directly to the Yankees, but during that season, and when he wound up playing for the Yankees at one point, and we were playing a game in Farragut Park, and I had a dark navy jersey on, and it didn't, it wasn't a Yankee jersey. I would never wear a Yankee jersey, but look, I don't hate the Yankees, but I ain't wearing their gear. It's not going to happen. But,
all righty.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I was like, guys, I'm Lee Mazzilli. And I put my sweatband up on my forearm, you know, like I'll never forget that. And then somebody turned around and said, but he's a Yankee. I'm like, yeah, but it's Lee Mazzilli, Brooklyn,
Yes.
you know?
Right.
So, you know, like stuff like that. It's like silliness,
right?
But you just remember it. You know, you just remember it, and it's just like, you know, I'm back. I'm seeing it now as I'm telling you guys the story. It was the sun was out. It was a beautiful day. I was playing first base. I was playing center field, going back and forth. I think I hit a couple of really good doubles down the line. You know, it's just one of those days. Right. You just, you know, when you're having a tough time, you know, for me, sometimes if I'm having trouble falling asleep, I'll think about some of those days, you know, playing ball with my friends, or, you know, the day that, you know, when I was trying out for the Zavarian basketball team and I broke my glasses, you know.
Wow.
It's just like stuff like that, you know, you remember and you force yourself to remember because you don't ever want to forget those days.
Yeah. I think
do you feel the kids go ahead,
sir.
Do you feel that the kids nowadays have that same feelings, the way that, you know, the memories that you have? Do the kids approach this game the same way?
I think every kid is different, you know. I think that they have different experiences. They have more stuff that distracts them that we ever did.
Right.
You know, we didn't really have a choice. You know, we played ball because we didn't have a screen to look at. We didn't have, and I'm not saying that as a, you know, get off my lawn type of thing. It's reality.
Yes,
it is.
And you know, it's just the way it is. I mean, you know, if I had gotten, you know, a video game. I mean, my video game was boop, boop. It was Pong. That was my video game. So I was, you know, and I was bored after like 30 seconds with that. So, you know, I'd rather go out and play ball. But kids today, it's different. You know, I think for instance, my son, you know, who played varsity baseball and varsity football, like, and his football team, you know, went to the Final Four.
Wow.
They beat Lawrence, you know, when they were playing, you know, the Long Island Championships. You know, he'll never forget any of that stuff. Right. I mean, he's still friends with his guys that he, you know, were on that team. So it's just, I don't think it's the same. It's just different.
Right.
You know, and I don't think sports has changed that much. It has, obviously. Parents have ruined more sports than they did when we were kids. We didn't need people to officiate our games. We didn't need a lot of that organized sports because we were playing on our own anyway. I mean, of course, I played organized sports,
right,
but we had a lot of our own thing.
Right.
You know, we called fouls. You know, we policed it ourselves. You know, if somebody didn't want to take the call, then you had to like. You know what I'm saying? So
I remember that commercial where the guy he misses the shot and he's like, he was fouled. That was us, right? Like, he missed the shot, I was fouled. That's it.
I think that Mark points to a very interesting point where he says parents have ruined it, right? And I think the overarching point to the conversation is that essentially money has ruined the game. And not only has it ruined the game, but it's ruined us as a people because we've become the allure of a contract for our child or them being successful in making a big money contract has distracted us from the understanding of why we're doing this in the first place. We do it because we enjoy playing the sport. We have a love for the game, right? But now when you mix money into it, and it's a lot of money now, it takes everything out of it. You know, it doesn't come from a real organic place. You know, they're helicoptering their kids and they want to pamper them. And, you know, my kid's special. And I think that overall, it's taken a lot away from the game. Whereas when we were growing up, like you said, Mark, we didn't have a screen. We had Pong. And we were poor. We didn't have Pong. We had each other. So the real place from whence the love grows for the sports, I think that's been diminished. And I think kids don't really get the benefit of that due to all of the distractions that you pointed to. So,
well, I think part of it is delusion. Because there are. I mean, I've coached a lot of these kids, and the kids are fine. It's the parents that sometimes they'll just fill they'll fill their kids' heads with these delusions of grandeur. Look, if you're not 6'3", 6'4", 230 pounds, or if not even that, if you don't have this natural talent, that you can see right away, there's so few opportunities, and it doesn't mean you don't work hard. It doesn't mean you don't play hard. It doesn't mean that you don't try to be the best that you can be. And coaching kids is a great responsibility, and you have to manage expectations. You have to be able to, but it's mostly managing the expectations of the parents, not the kids. Very few kids are out of their minds. You just have to, what I've always struggled with, and I'm not perfect, is not coaching the way I was coached. I'm old school. To me, sometimes you're hardest on your best player.
Yep.
My son, even now, I coached him a couple of times, and he didn't get any special treatment.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying? Because, what does that mean? You see other guys put their kids, they bat clean up, they're playing shortstop and they're pitching. Your kid better be the best kid on the team if you're doing that. You know what I'm saying?
Of course.
So, it's all that. We all think because we grew up a certain way that's the right way to do it, right?
Of course.
And then we run into different cultures, different kinds of people, and they do things in a different way. And I'm not going to, again, it's not an easy transition for the coach, for the kid, for the parents, for all those people involved. But you got to figure out a way to make it work.
Yes.
And it, to me, sports helped me in life immeasurably.
Right.
It taught me about teamwork. It taught me about leadership. It taught me about, doing the best that you can do and leaving everything out on the field. Not everybody enjoys the sports metaphors in the real world, but it taught me, a lot of lessons, some hard lessons, some tough lessons, some lessons I'd like to forget. But I'll tell you one thing, it taught me tolerance. It taught me how to, and look, there was no holds barred. I'm sure you guys grew up the same way.
Yep.
We said what we had to say.
And
it wasn't always politically correct.
At all.
Correct.
The woke police would have come for us.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? So, and I'm not proud of it. I'm not, I don't look at it as, oh man, I wish I could talk that way now, or
right.
It was just a rite of passage.
Right.
Back then, people felt more equal, I think, than they do now.
Really?
Whether it's social media, whether it's perception, whether it's reality, whether it's a narrative, no matter how you look at it, sports taught me how to kind of look at everybody and deal with them on the same real basis, whether they were there in the room or not. And I think that's a lesson that people are having to learn all over again. And sports helped me, you know what I'm saying? Like sports helped me learn those lessons and live those lessons.
Yeah. Wow. John Gruden, he's learning that all over again. Yeah.
But let me just say this. I know we want to talk about the book. I know we want to talk about stuff, but the Gruden thing for me, people look, you don't say anything about someone unless you would say it to their face. And that's how you kind of gauge whether or not you should say it or write it. I mean,
email.
The idea that you would, I mean, it was his own personal email, but he was emailing it to somebody's work email.
Right.
You're putting yourself out there.
And even if the people that are defending John Gruden, I don't think they're defending the things that he said. They're defending the idea that somebody's whole career could be destroyed by an email or a series of emails that he wrote 10 years ago. I'm not dying on that hill. I mean, don't write bad stuff.
Right.
Don't write things that are horrible. Like, I'm not defending that.
I think Mark, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but
no, go ahead.
I think it's sort of it's a difficult place for all of us to be in, right? Because the conversations that we have in the workplace and the conversations we have at home are two different things.
Right.
Because we all know that we have to remain professional at work.
Right.
And when it comes to our homes, hey, listen, like, this is my castle. Hey, Sel, this guy in a job, blah, blah, blah. His brother's a jerk off. His father's a drunk, whatever. But I think that what we all have to do in some way, shape, or form is start being adults again. I think that the people have regressed to being like children. Let's deal with the situation. Let's talk honestly to each other, even though we disagree. Even though I find out that you really don't like me, that's fine. But at the end of the day, there's an objective here, and we need to focus on that objective.
Right.
Now that we understand where you're at, cool. All right, let's see if you still need to be here or not, and can we still obtain our objective without your presence, if that's the case.
No one wants to listen. That's the problem.
Right.
Everybody wants to talk and
it's
cancel.
The hardest thing in the world.
Let's cancel. Yeah. No, why don't you listen to what that person's saying?
Look, I always say this. Whenever somebody gets, some troll comes for me on Twitter, I'm on Twitter a lot. That's really like my that's my social media thing. Some people it's Instagram, some people it's Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I enjoy them all on a certain level. But when somebody comes, I say, look, man, I don't burn bridges. I want to build them. I want to find common ground with people. I may be wrong. I may have taken something wrong, but you got to own it.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to be willing to talk about it. Even if I don't like what you're saying, I've had people really come at me over the course of my career. And it's, look, sometimes their criticism is valid. Maybe I've said some stupid things,
right.
But I don't delete tweets.
Okay.
I don't. If I tweeted something that was stupid, then I got to live with it. It's not like it disappears. It's right. Still there.
Yep.
And, when you delete a tweet, it's kind of gutless, to be honest with you. You got to own what you do. And that's why you got to be careful. Sometimes I can't tell you how many tweets I've written in the last year that I didn't send.
Right. Don't press send.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
My grandfather,
mm-hmm.
Joe Curcio, was a big letter writer, and he passed away when I was like 3 years old.
Wow.
But my mom, who passed in 2018, she always would tell stories about, he was a letter writer. He used to love to write letters, and that was the way he communicated with people. Mm-hmm. If he read something in the paper, he'd write a letter, to the paper. Or if he was angry about something and he wanted something to change, he would write a letter. But he would take the letter and then he would put it away. Like he would put it in a drawer or something. And he wouldn't mail it until he calmed down. And then either he would send it or he would throw it in the garbage. And I always have that in the back of my head, like when I'm going to, send a
vent,
send something that's,
in the moment.
Yeah. So I always have that in my head a little bit. I'm not perfect,
I don't think. Listen,
I have sent some cringy texts.
Yeah. At the end of the day, none of us are perfect, and I think that having the wherewithal to understand. Listen, me responding right now and putting this out there is not good because I'm speaking from a place of anger, right? And when you're angry, it's very irresponsible to go and speak in that moment. because you're gonna say something that's not really it's not gonna be good.
It's gonna escalate. Probably.
It's definitely gonna escalate the situation. Right. It's gonna make you look crazy. When you step back and go, okay, let me look at this. Let me give myself a minute and then address the situation. I think the outcome is a little bit better. Or learn to control your emotions. You got to find that happy medium, right. Especially with a person like yourself, because this is what you do for a living, right? Being a personality and a writer and a commentator, man, you're towing a very, very thin line. Whereas you can say the wrong thing, and next thing we know, damn, Sally, I heard Mark got canceled. You heard about that? Said something about A-Rod. I don't know. Something happened there.
I would have been long gone here from here.
For real. So Mark, growing up in East Flatbush, I mean, thinking about the area you grew up in, East 38th or 39th, you said?
39th.
What avenue was that off of? Church?
No, I was off of Glenwood Road and Farragut Road. So in between Glenwood and Farragut.
Wow.
That's more towards Junction, right?
Yes. Up more.
Yeah, up more.
Yeah. So I was born across the street from the parade grounds. I was at the beginning of East Flatbush. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was born in a Caledonia Hospital before it closed.
Mm-hmm.
So I lived on Caton Avenue between Argyle and Westminster.
Okay.
So that area now is like the Caribbean. I'm sure you may or may not be aware. It's a completely different neighborhood. But back in the 70s.
So is where I'm from,
Right.
Yeah.
Back in that time, it was it changed. It became diverse in the 70s.
It changed very quickly, but again, very lucky that I grew up in the midst of the change.
Right.
Because it was easier for me to adapt to, I went to Catholic school,
Wow.
I was, I'm Irish Italian. I went to Catholic school. When I started, it was mostly white.
Mm-hmm.
Midway, it started to change.
Mm-hmm.
But the difference is that the school started to change, but the neighborhood, I used to go to Farragut Park to play basketball all the time. We didn't it had grass now.
Yeah.
It didn't have grass then.
No.
It was all concrete. And, so when I would go down to play ball, there was all the kids from the projects, from Vanderveer, from the surrounding area. So it wasn't like I was some tourist, They used to call me Larry Bird because I was like one of the few white guys there. I don't look like Larry Bird. I certainly didn't play like Larry Bird.
Oh, okay.
But the guys would be like, yo, it's Larry Bird, So I always got a kick out of it. Was, again, I mean, I'm not, I'm not, it just was like, when I think about it, there were some things that were scary because I had gotten mugged, but it really, we had, like, I just reconnected with a guy, Evan Brown, that I grew up on we grew up on the block. We used to play basketball together. Mm-hmm. And I saw that he was on Facebook, and, we're like chatting on Facebook. Mm-hmm. And again, it was all about sports. The sports was what taught me that nobody's better than you and you're not better than anybody else, except he might have a better jump shot, or, he might have a better handle, or,
he could jump higher.
Sometimes the sports, like when we had our friend Mikey on Whip, you grew up in Bensonhurst, we grew up in Sunset Park, Coney Island, whatever, but you kind of had the same lives that we had growing up. It was like the same childhood. Maybe you had a little more money, not you, I'm saying them, but but we always had the same, let's play ball, let's football, let's do this, get home before the lights go on, type stuff. So Mark, I want to ask you, so did you go to school for writing, or how did you?
No, I didn't. It's so funny. When I was, from my sophomore year in high school till I was 26 years old, I thought I was going to be an actor.
Wow.
That's what I wanted to do. I could sing, I could act. I did love baseball. So I when I was in school, I studied broadcasting, arts and media. because my parents weren't keen on me having a drama degree. So they wanted me, to have something else. So I was like, look, if I don't, take Hollywood by storm, I'll thinking me, stupid me, what I was talking about before, delusion, I was like, well, if I don't make it in acting, I'll become an actor, and I'll become a broadcaster. I'll do play-by-play. I certainly have the knowledge. I had the articulation. I was able to, I used to when I stopped playing sports in high school, I was a PA announcer for the basketball team. Hi, everybody, and welcome.
Right.
So I was equally passionate about that, but honestly, I was focused. I mean, I wanted to be an actor. I wanted to sing. That's what I wanted to do. The writing and that ability is a natural thing that I had. And through, when you're an actor and you're playing a role, one of the things that they teach you is to write about the character, even if it's a really small part where you have one line. It's a great exercise to write about the character, to figure out where they're from. And, communicating is where it started. And then being able to tell the story, because that's what writing is. It's telling the story. And being a good writer means that you can tell a story more effectively
Right.
rather than not.
Right.
And that's where it all came from, and Pete Hamill passed away last year, one of the greatest journalists who ever lived. And he always talked about the best writers are the people that read the most. And that's what I did when I was a kid. All I did was read, and my reading comprehension was, I don't mean to brag, but like, I don't know how you guys did, like when in your schools where you went to the library and you could only go to one section because that was your reading level.
Wow.
Well, with me, I was the only kid for like probably through 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade that was able to get out the bigger kid books.
Wow.
And then I was getting out the adult books because I love to read, and I just, I was a little cocky. I would be like, I'm going to the,
the big
you
boy
guys
section.
enjoy your little baby books.
I'm going to get the National
there,
Geographic that you guys can't have access to.
But that's really where it came from. I didn't take journalism classes. I wasn't on I did write a couple of articles here and there at the high school newspaper, but it wasn't like I want to be a writer. It just wasn't, it was an organic thing that kind of, just happened.
Right. It was like an evolution for you.
Pretty much,
right.
but with no, the journey was not like, this is what I want to be. I mean,
it was a natural progression.
I read The Boys of Summer by Roger Kahn, probably like in 1974, 75. That's when I really became a baseball fan. And in the book, the first part of the book, he talks about being a beat writer for the Herald Tribune, and I thought that was cool. So maybe subconsciously there was some kind of thing there. And I didn't really think about it until 2001 when I started covering the Brooklyn Cyclones in their inaugural season, which was one of the coolest things I've ever done. That might have been the coolest summer professionally I've ever had. But, like, it's stuff like that. It's like, I sometimes say to myself, maybe that's why, that was God's plan for me to kind of like, go that way, but it wasn't any kind of, I didn't take any writing or, I just, I took English, I enjoyed reading, and I enjoyed, when other people would groan about, writing book reports. I did spend too much time on the covers because I like to draw, but I didn't, to me, it wasn't as laborious, for me, it was math. Math was my kryptonite. It still is.
I think everybody's kryptonite is in school is math.
I came in 5th in the spelling bee, by the way.
Nice.
Notice he said 5th.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't say I could spell.
So, Mark,
Thank God for Grammarly and word and spell check.
Going back and sort of playing off the question about school and such, where did you really cut your teeth in your industry, or what would you say was your most memorable moment when cutting your teeth in your career?
I think it wasn't just one moment.
Okay.
When I was 26, I after I graduated college, I went to California for a year. I went to Hollywood for a year. I lived in Hollywood trying to become an actor. Clearly, it didn't work out. But when I came back, I had to. I gave it a try for a little bit, because I had done decently before I had left, and a lot of people were telling me, including my future wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, was telling me, don't go, you have no idea what's going to happen out there. At least here, people kind of sort of know who you are, and whatever. It didn't work out. Right. So when I came back, I tried a little bit, and I said, you know what? This isn't the life for me. If I'm going to get married and have kids and have a family, it's too. First of all, it's too. The rejection I could handle. It wasn't that. It was, you can't have a life.
Yeah, you're grinding it out
on the go.
You just can't. And I had to make a decision. And to her credit, my then girlfriend, now wife, did not make me make a decision. She didn't say, "Oh, you have to give up acting." She figured I was going to make the decision I needed to make, and so that's when I turned to my career in broadcasting, and that's what I was going to do. I was like, okay, well, but see, I mistakenly thought that it was going to be easier to get into radio than it was. You know what I'm saying? So I got a full-time job working at a law firm as like a records department, clerk. And then I went to school. I went back to school to the then Connecticut School of Broadcasting. It's called something else now.
Nice.
But I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I learned more in that 8-week program, or however long it was, 16-week program, than I did, I think, my entire time in college.
Right.
Wow.
And because they had the facilities, and it was all focused on. It was all focused on just that.
Right.
And after I did that, I got an internship at WFAN.
Nice.
But it was from a classmate. It wasn't even from the school. The guy that was in my class knew somebody from FAN and hooked me up. Didn't even hook himself up. He hooked me up.
I was going to say, why didn't he hook himself up? He hooked you. Evidently, you had the talent for it.
Yes.
It's just so funny. I wrote about him in the book too. That he was, so I went to FAN. I picked up a bunch of stuff there. But it was really this guy. When I got my first job in broadcasting, was up in Stamford, Connecticut. And there was this broadcaster, the sportscaster there, was named Bill Hall. And I had been hired as a producer. I didn't know anything on the technical side. I didn't know anything about Stamford, Connecticut. The only thing I knew is that every day when I got off the train, because I wasn't driving then, I would walk past Bobby Valentine's restaurant.
Wow.
So this is 1996. So this is like before he was the manager of the Mets. This was probably like January, February. So I would just walk past it every day, and I just remember Bobby Valentine, being part of the, he was a Met coach and he was a Met player, and he was just always one of those guys that my dad always talked about as being a guy whose career was cut short because of an injury.
Yeah.
So I'm walking past Bobby Valentine, and then all of a sudden, a couple of months later, he becomes manager of the Mets because they fired Dallas Green. And this Bill Hall guy, he's like, you got a good voice. You want to do something like, Met reports, on the radio? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
He did a cartwheel.
And he just
don't twist my arm.
Like he could tell that I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I guess he just took a liking to me, and he, gave me the opportunity, and that was really the first on-air experience that I had in sports.
How'd you do?
And that kind of was like, that was one of those first moments where I thought that this might be for me. And it all kind of, it seems quick now when I tell the story, but it was a little bit longer of a climb. But that was like the first real kind of like, hey, I can do this type of thing.
Did the show go well your first time out?
Yeah, it's funny. They started using me for sports stuff. Now, I wasn't like, I didn't have a sports show, but I would do little reports, like during the, here's the Mets report. The Mets have hired Bobby Valentine. I think it was even the first thing I did, I believe, was talking about Bobby Valentine getting the job, because it was a big story in Stanford, because he's considered the greatest athlete in Stanford history.
Wow.
Because he was drafted by USC. He went to USC. He was drafted. He was a 3-sport athlete. He played baseball, football, and I forget what else. I think he was like a ballroom dancer champion or something like that. But yeah, so that was kind of like, and then that winter or that fall, when the Yankees were losing, when the Yankees were down 2-0 against the Braves in the 1996 World Series, the morning drive show wanted to have a guest on. They couldn't get anybody to talk about the series. So Bill suggested to them, why don't you have Mark on? The guy knows everything. And at first they were like, he's the producer for the show. But they were like, okay, whatever. They gave me a chance. They brought me in the studio. And they said, what do you think? Can the Yankees come back? And I said, yeah, why not? I said, the Mets did it 10 years ago in 86. They were down 0-2. They lost their first 2 games at home, and they came back. And this team's every bit as good as that team. Why couldn't they come back? And of course, they wound up coming back. And all of a sudden, people are, wow, this guy really knew what he was talking about. I mean, I was grasping at straws, man.
Right.
I wasn't gonna, I hated the Braves, so I wasn't like I was gonna root for, I wasn't gonna say, oh yeah, the Braves are gonna win. It's like, yeah, thanks a lot, guy. So I figured I made a bold prediction.
And you look like a genius.
I kind of sort of believed it, and it came true. So, so that was kind of cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining the show, I'm your host, Mr. A.
Sally Sansone in the building.
And tonight, this is the set 6145. We're joined by Mr. Mark Healey. He is the author of Gotham Baseball, New York's all-time team. And he's also a commentator. Mr. Healey brings an extensive amount of experience and some great stories to boot about his path and career climb. One thing that you all should notice, and I noticed tonight, is the picture over Mr. Healey's right shoulder. In the preamble, I was kind of like, who's that guy? And Mr. Healey Mark made reference to the fact that he wanted to dress up his set, especially for us. Right. So I guess I'm going to start that off. The gentleman that is over your shoulder, can you explain to us and the audience who that gentleman is? Okay.
That portrait, which was done by John Panisi, who is the official artist of Gotham Baseball, who is also the official artist for the New York Baseball Writers Association chapter, the New York chapter.
Wow.
He's amazing, and he's a very good friend of mine, very talented, obviously.
Yes.
That is Monte Irvin, who played left field for the New York Giants in 1951, was part of the 1954 World Series champion New York Giants, Manhattan's last champions, as my friend Greg Prince, wrote a piece for us about that team. Monte Irvin, what most people don't know, and anyone who reads the book, I selected him to be the all-time left fielder for the all-time New York's all-time team.
Okay.
And a lot of people were like, Monte Irvin, who's Monte Irvin? Now, you got to be a real old school baseball fan to know who Monte Irvin is. But what people will discover when they read the book is that Monte Irvin was the guy that everyone thought was going to be the first, black player in Major League Baseball. He was actually voted by everyone in the Negro Leagues as the most likely successor, the most likely person to break the color line. He was probably a better player than Jackie Robinson, based on, look, stats from the Negro Leagues are very incomplete. It's hard to, I know both baseballreference.com has done a phenomenal job in adding the statistics to their database, but they're incomplete, because there wasn't that kind of statistical, focus. And let's be honest, the teams were poor. They didn't have a lot of money to spend on a statistician, but Monte Irvin played for the Newark Eagles in the Negro Leagues, and he could do it all. He could fly. He had a great arm. He was a great fielder, great base runner. Could hit for power. Could hit for average. He was the complete. He was Willie Mays before Willie Mays.
Wow.
And the person that told me that was Buck O'Neil, the legendary Buck O'Neil, because I had gotten the amazing chance to interview him in 2006, just a few years before he passed away at the Brooklyn. And it was in Brooklyn because I was covering the Cyclones, and he was at the Brooklyn Baseball Gallery. And somebody said, "Hey, Buck O'Neil is by himself in the museum. You better go get him."
Wow.
And I tell the story in the book, but, I got to spend a half an hour by myself with Buck O'Neil. I mean, I can't even put into words how amazing that experience was. But one of the things we talked about, he said, people talk about old players they've seen. He said, Monte Irvin at 20 years old was perfect. Like, he was perfect, and it was just this weird set of circumstances where he, wasn't able to become the first. He went to go serve in World War II. He had this inner ear thing that messed him up for a couple of years. And then when, Branch Rickey was like, "Are you ready? Are you ready to come?" Monte Irvin, was like, "Look, don't take me. I am not the player I was. This thing, I can't even stand up straight."
Wow.
That's how
like a vertigo type of.
Yeah, it was kind of like, I guess he was, you were saying like forgetting. I'm forgetting what I wrote in the book, but I think it had something to do with the shelling. They were like, he was by artillery.
He's shell shocked.
Yeah, and it kind of like
messed up his equilibrium.
Yes, exactly. Wow, that's a good SAT word. Very good.
Trying to show off a little bit here.
That's good. That's good. I love it.
I'm in the presence of greatness. I got to flex my vocabulary.
So, Mark,
how did you? I'm in the presence of greatness.
How did you how did this come to fruition of the Gotham, the all-time team?
Well, it's funny. I had started Gotham Baseball magazine. I had started Gotham Baseball back in 2005. The idea was to create something that didn't exist anywhere else. And that was a magazine that celebrated the past, present, and future of the New York game. And to me, baseball is a New York game. We're the ones, nobody loves it more than us. Nobody argues about it more than us. And frankly, I think New York sports fans are smarter than everybody else. And I wanted a place where people could learn about the Monte Irvins of the world, where they could learn about, that historical aspect to who we are and why we do the things that we do when it comes to baseball. But I also wanted a place where people could talk about the game today and people could talk about the prospects. Everything that were reading at that point, everything that we were watching was all focused on just the here and the now. And that's great, but I wanted to do something different. So we started this magazine. Long story short, here I am. I'm nearing 50 years old, and this is in 2016, 2017. And I'm like, Gotham Baseball never got its just due. It was critically acclaimed. It never made any money. It cost me a lot of money. but it was a passion project that I could just never let go. I kept the website going, you know, and then finally my friend Matt Cerrone, the guy who started Mets Blog, said to me, why don't you just like do a new Gotham, do something with it. Why don't you write a book? I'd never thought about writing a book before. You know, at least about that. I had toyed with the idea of writing a book about the Wilpons and how terrible they were at owning the Mets. I had thought about that a little bit. I thought about a couple of different things, but you know, to me, to write a book, I felt like, who has time? I had 3 kids. I still have 3 kids. You know, I mean, I'm a husband. You know, when am I going to have time to write a book? You know, but it just came to me like I wanted to do. We had this online ballot that we had done you know, where we asked people to select a team based up of a ballot where somebody was from the Mets, somebody was from the Yankees, somebody was from the New York Giants, and somebody was from the Brooklyn Dodgers. Because I thought it would be just a fun exercise. And maybe like do like a Stratomatic game with it or something. Like I was just playing around with something. Right. But we got baseball people, you know, scouts, former players, baseball executives, writers, bloggers, fans. We thousands of people voted on this ballot because the website, like I said, you know, the magazine never made any money, but the website was always popular.
Wow.
And so I was like, wow, I have all the stuff there. You know, like I have the beginnings of a book, and I don't even have to like, you know, I don't have to start from scratch. Right, I have a foundation here to do it. So that was really the idea. You know, that was really it. It was like, who else is going to write this book? You know, we've seen all-time Mets books, we've seen all-time Yankees books, but no one's ever looked at New York as this, you know, collection of greatness.
Yep.
You know,
that's true.
And I was like, this would be fun. And then like I started thinking about how I would do it. And I got my friend John Panisi involved because he always had done such great art for us with the magazine. And then I got my friend Todd Radham involved. Now, Todd, you guys are aware of the big 3, right?
Right.
The big 3, the 3-on-3. Yeah.
Yes.
So my friend Todd, who just happens to be this like incredible graphic designer, he designed all the uniforms and logos for that league.
Wow.
He designed this Brooklyn Cyclones uniforms. He designed
That's Ice Cube's league, Mr. A.
Yeah, exactly. And Ice Cube loves Todd. I mean,
yeah.
I think Todd is more excited about Ice Cube loving him than me loving him. But
the set loves Cube too.
But Todd said to me, like I said, it was like I think it was 2017, and we were talking at the Queens Baseball Convention. You know, it's a Mets convention that's run by a couple of friends of mine that happens every year. And we were sitting at you know, at the bar having a beer, and he was like, look, you know, I love your passion, and the next time you work on a project, I want to be involved. Wow. So, you know, it was a couple of years later, I said, hey, Todd, I got a project, you know, you want to get involved, you know, and I thought I was going to get a pleasant, hey, you know, I'm really busy, you know, designing.
I tell everybody that.
You know, designing, you know, working for the NFL, working for the NBA, you know, the guy's amazing. He's nationally known. I mean, he's unbelievable. But he's like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to be part of this. So, I mean, then it just all kind of came together, you know?
Wow.
Mark, so was the fan votes the end or be all, or did you guys decide who to omit? And
no, I really wanted to stay honest to the fan vote. Because I thought it was so, I thought it was so interesting. Genuine. You know, when you look at the way, because, you know, like Jackie Robinson, you know, was clearly the winner at second base. Lou Gehrig, clearly the winner at first base. Babe Ruth, clearly the winner in right field. But like the left field, the winner was Monte Irvin. The only places that I kind of changed was manager. The fans had picked John McGraw, and you know, I finally decided that it was going to be Joe Torre, because I don't think anyone's ever going to do what he did with those teams. And whether or not whether or not you want to give him credit or not, he had to deal with a primetime George Steinbrenner. He had to deal with all those personalities. He had to deal with the media. And being in the media that covered those teams, I'm telling you, it was not easy. And really, it was Marty Appel, the great Yankee baseball historian, who wrote the foreword for this book, who's been a friend of Gotham and a friend of mine, dear friend of mine for a long time. That guy worked for the Yankees back in 1968 when Ralph Houck was a manager, and he dealt with all these great Yankee old timers. And he had just written a book on Casey Stengel. So I thought he was going to tell me, Casey Stengel would be the perfect guy because he managed the Mets, he managed the Yankees, he managed the Dodgers, he played for the Giants.
Wow.
But he said, no, it's Joe Torre, and then he gave me all the reasons, those reasons I just gave you there. And the more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, man, it's got to be Joe Torre, and I had some connections to Joe Torre, not just as a fan, but I had interviewed him a bunch of times, and I knew his brother, Rocco, that passed away because he had lived in my neighborhood in Queens for a while. And we would talk all the time about baseball, and it kind of made sense. It all kind of clicked into place that it would be Joe Torre. And then the pitching was different. The top pitchers I respected, Christy Mathewson, Tom Seaver, Whitey Ford, but then it got a little trickier picking the last two pitchers because people had picked, like Jerry Koosman. And, Koosman's great, deserved to get his number retired, but he's not one of the top 5 pitchers in New York baseball history, So that was a little tricky. But the fan vote that really blew my mind and where I went away from the, where I really stuck to the ballot was that the ballot for catcher to me was unbelievable. It was Roy Campanella from Brooklyn, Yogi Berra from the Yankees, Gary Carter from the Mets. I put Gary on the ballot. That's a long story. We don't have time for it. It's in the book. But I put Gary because he had won a World Series, and I just felt like he was the missing piece to that Yankee team. And he was a Hall of Famer, to the Met team, and he was a Hall of Famer. At the time of the ballot, Mike Piazza was not a Hall of Famer. And Roger Bresnahan from the Giants. Who do you think won the vote?
Mike Piazza.
As a write-in.
As a write-in?
As a write-in. How could I not respect the fans?
Yeah.
You have to.
And and I was like, people are going to kill me. I thought Yogi Berra was going to win it easy because Met fans and Yankee fans both love Yogi. America loves Yogi.
Yeah.
And so I started doing, my research, and the guy that, I always say people click things in for me, Mike Vaccaro from the Post, who's also a friend. I'm not name dropping. I'm just saying, like, it wasn't just
it sure seems that way.
We good. We good. Bring him on, baby.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to say, like, I trust these people. It wasn't just like,
of course,
like I just randomly asked some, famous
right.
guy his opinion.
Right.
But I said to him, I said, what do you think about Piazza being the all-time catcher? I said, aren't people going to get, annoyed? Because, he writes a lot of historical stuff. He's written some of the best history books I've ever read about baseball.
Right.
And he said, Yogi, he goes, Mike Piazza is not just the best hitting catcher of all time. He's probably one of the top 3 or 4 right-handed hitters of all time.
Mm.
And that really resonated with me. And then when I started to, do research as far as his analytics, his defensive analytics that were not around when people were killing his defense was nowhere near, let's say, a Yogi Berra when you look at just throwing out runners. He was not good at throwing out runners. He was great at everything else.
Right.
Mm.
When they talk about framing, how framing is so important. He was a great framer. He was great at balls in the dirt. He played hurt. I found a bunch of quotes from people, players, pitchers that had thrown to Mike, and they said they loved throwing to Mike. So,
sounds like Gary Sanchez.
I'll tell you, Mike was no slacker. You know,
Wow.
you could say a lot of things about Mike. Mike
and his story
Mike
to get
hard.
there, right? His story to become a LA Dodger eventually, and then the Met. I mean, it's an incredible
Look,
journey.
the thing about Piazza to me is that as much as I rooted for the guy, it wasn't like he was. I was always more of a Gary Carter guy because I love the. Mike was a different kind of guy. Mike was like Patrick Ewing, you know.
Ooh.
He wasn't emotional. He just kind of led by example. He didn't talk a lot. Now I'm not a huge Patrick Ewing guy either, but huge Nick fan, but not a Patrick Ewing guy. We'll do another show on that
for sure.
Wow. I'm sorry, Mark. I got to stop you there. I take umbrage with that comment. How do you say I'm a Nick guy, but I'm not a Pat Ewing guy? Oof.
Look, it's a long story. I told you we don't have time.
We'll leave the teaser for the next episode.
I'm a Bernard King guy. That he was.
Oh, listen.
Fort Hamilton, baby.
Yeah, I was just going to say King doesn't get no love for his broken promises to Fort Hamilton. Sorry.
My guy. So for me, the whole Mike chapter has been very controversial. The Yankee fans hate it. But look, I mean, I'm not going to, and it wasn't like it was a Met boy. It wasn't like it was a Met fanboy vote either.
Right.
Because Jeter was a huge vote getter at shortstop. I took some heat for Piazza, but I stick by it. And I'm glad that it's a great question, Mr. A, because that is exactly what I did. I stuck to that vote. I stuck to most of them. It was just manager and some of the pitchers that I kind of couldn't. Sometimes the fans are wrong. They're not always right.
There's certain things that you couldn't look past.
Yeah, like number, what do they say? Ball don't lie. I mean, look, the numbers don't lie. They just don't. And sometimes when, like even David Cone, I mean, you look at David Cone's numbers as a Met pitcher and a Yankee pitcher. I mean, his numbers were better than Jerry Kuzman's. Dwight Gooden's numbers were better than Jerry Kuzman's. And I had to dig deeper. I had to dig deeper and find, not that I didn't have to find that Carl Hubble was great. Right. I knew he was great, but I had to look at the numbers and do a deep dive, and finding Dazzy Vance and looking at his great story and his career. I love books. I love movies. I love radio shows where I learn something. I don't need to hear a bunch of guys talking. I could do that in real life. I could go down to the bar. I could, hang out with my friends, play cards, and have those conversations. I don't need to listen to other people have conversations. So I want to learn something. I want to be able to take away something from what I've read or experienced. So I wanted to write a book like that. Every chapter I wanted somebody to walk away and say, man, I didn't know that, because it would spark a conversation, right? It would spark a debate. One of the things I talk about in the book is growing up, somebody would run down to Joe's Candy Store, get the paper, and I knew Lee Mazzilli wasn't better than the Yankees center fielder at the time. I knew that Doug Flynn wasn't better than Willie Randolph, but we would still argue that they were. You're always going to support your guy. And sitting on that stoop was our Twitter. Now that was our chat room, was that. And so I wanted this book to be kind of that, like where people would argue about, dude, you don't know what you're talking about. This is the guy that should be the first baseman. This is so that's kind of like what the whole vibe was supposed to be.
Kind of like how I felt.
You know what I'm saying? Like I've done some of these shows where that's what we do is argue about my picks. Yeah. Guys even that like me, like, how could you pick that guy? So that's the beauty, I think, sometimes that we've lost. Like you talked about, of course, people aren't listening.
Selly, when he said, sorry, Mark, when he said Gary Carter lost to Piazza, right? Does it really translate? Because Piazza was a great player, but Gary Carter was the kid. He was the guy in the moment, right? Did Piazza have that moment? Did he,
I think he had some of those moments.
The 9/11 moment was a huge moment for him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after 9/11 coming back.
Yeah.
But Mark, I have a 2-part question. Going up, did you watch the 30 for 30 with the Mets, the Queens? You know,
I was in it.
Okay. And
I watched it. Honestly,
now
I had
he's
seen
dropping his own name.
Yeah,
I like this guy.
I gotta go back now
because I was in it.
All right.
Absolutely. Yes, I did.
Okay.
I did watch it.
All right. I gotta go back and see Mark in there now.
I'm in the very beginning. Don't blink.
Okay. Were you singing and acting?
No. I was actually talking about Tom Seaver.
And Mark, here's another thing. Oh, I think I remember that part. Oh, I gotta go back for sure. My second question is I'm not a big, like, I get the ADD kicks in when I'm reading. Do you do audiobooks?
I'm sorry, say that again.
My ADD kicks in when I'm reading.
Oh,
and
okay.
I stop. So do you do audiobooks?
That's a good question. We're in the process of exploring that possibility.
Mm-hmm.
It is something I do want to do, but I have to really have the. I don't want to half-ass it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure.
As Ron Swanson would say, I want to whole-ass it. You know, I want to make sure I do it in a way that it sounds good. You know, I don't have I don't have the technological apparatus now to do the audio book right now. I've been talking to a couple of people about producing it. It's really going to come down to, just getting the. I'm going to have a Kickstarter for Gotham, hopefully in a month or so. You know, and we're going to try to raise some money for just stuff just like that. You know,
equipment.
For an audio book. I know Dom, my cousin Dom, who you guys know.
Mm-hmm.
He's been begging me for an audio book for a while, so it's definitely something that is on the agenda. Sure. Yes.
Yeah, when it happens, Mark, let us know. We'll definitely promote it.
Absolutely.
I think our hometown, we definitely love to bring on people from where we're from, and guys that have followed their passions and have done great things. So we're definitely in support of that. Also, I find it interesting that during the conversation, and somebody mentioned it in the room, that there wasn't an utterance of the great Pete Rose. Why is that?
Why would Pete Rose be in? Why would we talk about Pete Rose?
Ooh, okay.
I'm serious.
Yeah. Well.
What would be the reference? I mean, what would be the?
That was a question in the room. He's like, "Oh, he hasn't talked about Pete Rose at all." I was like, "Yeah."
Oh, I didn't understand. I didn't understand what you were trying to say.
I didn't frame that the right way. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Don't apologize. Pete Rose. Pete Rose is a complicated guy. He doesn't have anything to do with New York baseball.
Right.
But I'm not a Pete Rose guy at all.
Really.
He made his own bed. Great player.
Right.
Absolutely a great player.
So you think it's deserved, Mark?
What, that he's not in the Hall of Fame?
Right.
Yeah, he created his own reality. I mean, let's put it this way, if he was on the ballot and somebody voted him in, I wouldn't have a protest, I wouldn't be like, oh, I'm never going to the Hall of Fame. I mean, but the guy lied.
Yeah.
If Pete Rose, look, there's so many things that Pete Rose could have done. I don't feel sorry for the guy, man. First of all, he's not a great guy, not a good guy,
Wow.
He's not, he's not a good guy. And I understand fans loving him, the way he played, the fact that, like, if you read Joe Posnanski's book, The Big Red Machine, it's like, oh yeah, hey Pete, can you play left? Sure. Hey Pete, can you play third? Yeah. Hey Pete, can you go play first? I mean, that's the kind of player he was. He burned to win, and he played hard. But he beat up Buddy Harrelson. He was on the Phillies. Ugh. And then I was happy. I honestly, despite all that, despite all those years, I did not care for him.
Mm-hmm.
When he went back to the Reds as a player manager,
I
thought that was kind of cool. I thought it was kind of cool because it was old school, just like he was, player, manager, because it was old school, just like he was, player, manager. Then he gets busted for gambling, right? And Bart Giamatti gets so, wound up with the whole thing that he actually dies of a heart attack.
Wow.
And
I did not know that.
And Pete Rose, I'm not saying Pete Rose killed Bart Giamatti, but the fact that Bart had to deal with it and had to deal with that, because he didn't want to be the guy that banned Pete Rose, but Pete Rose, like, again, he created his own reality.
Right.
And then when given the opportunity to admit what he did, he lied for like 25 years. I'm supposed to feel sorry for the guy? No, I don't. You know what? Leo DeRocha didn't get into the Hall of Fame till after he died. And that was a guy who deserved to be in the Hall of Fame.
He couldn't delete that tweet.
Buck O'Neil should be in the Hall of Fame. You know what I'm saying? Like all these people, I'm not lighting any candles for Pete Rose. Sorry.
Yeah.
He made his own bed.
So
but again, if they decide to vote him in, if baseball decided to put him in, I wouldn't protest. I wouldn't say like, oh my God, absolutely not. But don't ask me to feel sorry for the guy, because I don't.
Right. I think that was the context of the reference to Pete Rose, being that you're a sports guy, you're a commentator, writer, author, somebody, and a journalist. Somebody wanted to understand your opinion of him. And I believe,
great player. Can't stand him.
I appreciate the honesty. I appreciate the honesty, because a lot of people,
when you tell the truth, you don't have to remember what you said.
Right. Wow.
There you go.
You know what I'm
saying? Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Healey letting it all out. I love this.
Well, that's
exactly.
Just wait till the Patrick Ewing show.
Oh, listen.
As we say in the hood, facts.
Yeah. I find it ironic that somebody as such as yourself, that follows sports, loves sports, grew up in Brooklyn, is a New Yorker, could love the Knicks, and I kind of get it, but not like Pat Ewing. It's confusing to a degree.
No, it's not.
No, I mean, for me, it's.
I'll tell you why. No, I'll give you the. Let's put it this way. For me, it's not. And it's funny. My microphone. See, you guys got me all going.
It's the truth.
Yeah, there you go. Pat just knocked your mic down.
I didn't look. You have to understand something, okay? Now, back in the 80s, there was a young man from Brooklyn playing for St. John's named Chris Mullen.
Went to Severian like you.
From my neighborhood. He was my guy. Still is. When a guy who you've seen hoop in your own backyard, like not in my backyard, but like, it changes everything. So I hated Georgetown, like with a passion. Wow. Especially since they beat us, and it was awful. So when he gets picked number one by the Knicks, and here's the thing, I thought Patrick Ewing was going to be another Bill Russell. I thought Patrick was going to be a shot blocker, a tenacious rebounder. I thought he was going to own the paint, and instead we got Bob Lanier, great player. But to me, I always thought that Patrick wasn't the player I envisioned that he was going to be. Great player, Hall of Famer, great scorer. In a lot of ways, I just felt that I think Patrick created I get killed all the time, by the way. When I worked at Associated Press, there was a guy, Anthony Guido, that used to work right next door to me, who's a huge, he's a huge Nets fan, but he loves Patrick Ewing, and would get so aggravated with me when I would talk about, other centers I'd rather have. He'd get all upset. I just never. I appreciated his ethic, his work ethic. I appreciated the fact that he was, that he played as much as he did. I just never warmed up to him. I just didn't. I hate to say it. I mean, and Bernard King kind of like was my, he wasn't, I mean, he was my guy, my favorite Knick. Mark Jackson, Bernard King, those were my guys. And so like with Patrick, I just never warmed up to him.
Mark, you brought up the Nets. So I want to ask a modern day question about the Nets. What do you think about like the Kyrie situation with the vaccine and everything going on?
You're going to get me in trouble.
Okay.
So, first of all,
we could skip it.
I kind of always had a soft spot for the Nets, always, for a number of reasons. Michael Ray Richardson was one of my favorite players when I was a kid, and then when he went to the Nets, couldn't root against him, so I kind of like rooted for him. Then Ray Williams went over there. Bernard King started Bernard King was Rookie of the Year with the Nets. People forget that's where he started his career. So I always kind of had my eye on the Nets a little bit, you know. So when I hear first of all, Kyrie is the most likable, unlikable person in the NBA. Does that make sense?
Yes,
perfect sense.
Like I think that he is I think he's genuine. I think that he's very thoughtful. He's smart. But he's also bananas. And he's such a like delicate genius that it's hard for me, and at the end of the day, if he had come to the Knicks, I really didn't look. I was down on Durant coming to the Knicks after the Achilles injury. I'll be honest. As soon as that happened, I was like, I don't want a guy with like he comes to the Knicks, he's going to be Antonio McDyess 2.0. But I love Durant. Loved him when everybody was killing him when he went to the Warriors. I was probably one of the few people that were defending him, online. But then when I found out that he didn't want to come to the Knicks, I don't want to be the savior of the Knicks. All right, go to Brooklyn, have fun.
Right.
And the whole thing with Kyrie right now, I mean, I'm of two minds about it. I mean, you have to admire the fact that he's, sticking to his guns. But by the same token, if you're a Nets fan, I'd be livid.
Right. And a teammate.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, again, to me, the Nets can't lose enough right now for me because they went out of their way to dump on the Knicks. The Knicks aren't cool. The Knicks aren't this.
Right.
So I'm going to war with my guys. So, I hope Kyrie doesn't play a minute this season.
Like Mets fans, Knicks fans are very loyal.
Well, I mean, look, don't look at like I was fine when they went there, but when you start taking shots at the Knicks, I know James Dolan but you know what? James Dolan wasn't Fred Wilpon. James Dolan always spent money. He may be a terrible owner in the sense that he makes a lot of bad decisions. And the Knicks have been terrible,
right.
I think, in part because of James Dolan.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But he went out and got Phil Jackson. Everybody thought that was the brilliant hire, that Phil Jackson was going to be awesome. But it didn't work.
That was appearances because we also had Isaiah in the front office, right?
Yeah,
Isaiah's
but
an amazing basketball guy. Yeah, you
remember when Isaiah came out and said, "Hey, welcome to the playoffs, New York." Really? Really?
You know what? He was being facetious at the moment, but also he was trying to turn the knife because of all the years of suffering that New York Knicks fans have gone through.
Yeah, as another guy I absolutely loved as a player, him as a player, but when he became a Knicks front office person and coach, ugh.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I think Isaiah really showed his mettle as a person when he was in the front office, because Isaiah, for all intents and purposes, as a player, is an amazing player and teammate. The commitment, the camaraderie, the depth. He would stand shoulder to shoulder with his guys.
Absolutely.
However, as an executive, he really put himself out there and showed who he was with the things that he did, with his time at the New York Knicks organization, which to me gave me all the reason, to feel justified why I never really liked Isaiah. You know what I mean?
I think there was a lot of skepticism. If Isaiah had come here fresh off of his career without the CBA disaster, without the Pacers disaster, if he had come in a little bit more with a better resume as an executive, I think that the media would have been a little bit more maybe respectful when he first came in.
Right.
I think a lot of Isaiah's pettiness happened because everybody was kind of like, what's up with the CBA guy? Like there was a lot of like, you know what I'm saying? Like there wasn't any excitement.
Yeah.
When Isaiah came on board.
Yeah.
And maybe it was because it was Dolan who hired him. Maybe it was because people just didn't respect what he had done up until that point. And let's be honest, he hadn't done much.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think when people who can't handle New York show you right away that they can't handle New York.
Randy Johnson,
he was never able to deal with. He had a sneer in his voice. And look, I get it. Like, people don't like the media. I get it all the time. Even my own friend. Hey, Mr. Fake News. I get it all the time. Trust me.
Wow.
You got to have a thicker skin, man.
For sure.
You got to be able to, first of all, you got to admit when you're wrong. You got to admit when you don't know something. And you got to be truthful, when you ask your question. And I think that there are people in our business that are jerks. Let's be honest. I mean, just because you become a journalist, just because you're a blogger, just because you're a fan, you're not predestined to be anything. You are who you are. So there's jerks everywhere. There's good people and there's jerks. So, I can understand people not liking the media because they don't like some of the questions that get asked during a press conference. I roll my eyes. There was a guy that used to be in the Met Clubhouse, an SNY cameraman, who used to say, "One night I'm just going to take the pictures of all the faces that you make when people ask terrible questions." He goes, it entertains me because usually I'm so bored when I'm in this locker room. But watching your face is hilarious, and I didn't know how to take it, because I was like, does everybody else seeing this? He goes, no. You the way, like, it's just because I do a lot of this. I'm like,
this guy again.
Really? And you can't say it out loud. So I guess, but yeah, I get it. So, but you got to be stronger than that.
Yeah. There's a saying.
What's that expression? Never let them see you sweat.
Yeah,
because it's blood in the water, man.
Yeah.
There's another saying, negativity is attractive. And people a lot of people love to throw that negativity and the hate, and that's, the social media platforms and all that stuff nowadays. That's what they do. But Mark, I want to ask you 2 questions before we let you go.
Sure.
Old time sports moment, like favorite athlete, whatever, like anything that happened to you that was like, this was the moment that you was like, ah, man, the best guy I ever met, whatever. And favorite sports movie.
The best athlete I ever met, Tom Seaver. And I got to interview him like
legendary
3 times.
Wow.
He's my favorite player of all time.
Wow.
And I was not surprised how tough he was to interview. He not a bad guy, but just like, you had to be ready. Like, you had to know your stuff. You know what I'm saying? And you had to be ready for the kind of stuff that when you ask him a question, you better ask him a good question, because he'll have he won't have any of that. You know what I'm saying? I asked him when Citi Field opened up, I asked him about, what do you like most about Citi Field? And he said, the dirt.
What?
And I thought he was being being a wise guy, but I didn't respond that way. Like, A, he's Tom Seaver, but B, Tom doesn't say anything lightly. Like, he's not that kind of an interview. He said the dirt, and I let him expand. Like I didn't be like the dirt, because if you guys, I'd be like the dirt. What's the matter with you? You know what I'm saying? But he was like the dirt. And then he said, yeah, I went down to the field and he was just talking about the dirt and how, it had no rocks in it. It was like perfectly fine. And to be able to pitch with that, because he was always so particular about his landing spot, the whole, he would get, he was a drop and drive pitcher.
His knee.
And it was like, he's talking about the dirt. And then I'm telling you, not 15 minutes later, I forget who was the pitcher. I'm going to say Mike Pelfrey, maybe. Whoever was the opening night pitcher that night slipped on the mound. And I said, hey, Tom, there's your dirt, And he looked at me for a second, like I was like, oh, I'm going to get yelled at by Tom Seaver. Why was I such a wise ass? And then he did like a, laughed
Touché.
a little.
Yeah.
It was like the coolest moment, ever,
Wow.
But the best sports moment, no question, 86 Mets. There's no question.
I wasn't surprised that he made reference to that.
Yeah, no, that was, there was a lot going on in my life at that time. And there's a lot, it was my summer of my senior year in high school, the fall of my freshman year in college. We could do a whole nother show just on the 86 series. So, I mean, it was just, look, I've seen the Islanders win 4 straight cups.
Wow.
It might have been, the Falcons, if they had won, I'm an Atlanta Falcons fan, another long story, but, 28-3 is going to be really hard to ever get over. But if they had won that Super Bowl, it still wouldn't have beat 86, but it'd be right there.
Right.
Mark, let me ask you, who's your pick for manager for the Mets?
I've been pretty open about this, that I don't want to get excited about. For years I've done this. I've speculated about who I wanted for GM, who I wanted for manager, who I wanted for president of baseball operations. At the end of the day, I want the best manager possible.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see. Look, at the end of the day, if I had the pick and I could pick it, it'd be Wally Backman. And it's not because he was an 86 Met. It's not because of any other reason that I have interviewed Wally a bunch of times. We've talked baseball a lot. And I truly believe that he'd be the guy that'd get the most out of a good team.
Wow.
It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So I don't do that anymore. There are guys I'd like to see. I'd love to see John Gibbons, former Mets catcher, a guy who's had success in the major leagues, a guy who can deal with the media, a guy who can deal with the front office. I like catchers as managers because they're probably the most involved guys in the game. I wouldn't mind Ron Washington. He's a guy that I 100% respect. A guy who, people don't know this. Ron Washington spent a long time in the Mets system as a coach, and is he's highly respected all across baseball.
Yes.
I wouldn't mind Wash, but again, I want someone who the new president of baseball operations or the general manager, who they want,
right?
Because that I don't want a situation where you're bringing a manager who wants to do one thing. You have a general manager. I don't think everybody has to sit around and have tea and crumpets. That doesn't have to happen. But the manager has to be part of the conversation and part of the solution. I don't want somebody that's just going to follow orders, because then the players, they know that he's following orders and they're not going to pay any, so that's why it's got to be somebody that has some, if Dusty Baker can go manage in Houston, anybody can manage, like Dusty Baker is as old school as they come. And if he can go work for an analytical organization like Houston and coexist and still get the respect of the players, that's the kind of guy you want. I don't know if Buck Showalter's that guy. because Buck is more about, he wants to do things his way.
Right.
I would love to get Buck Showalter, but again, I don't want to speculate. I think it's irresponsible, actually, not for fans. Fans can do whatever they want, but I think it's irresponsible when journalists set those expectations and put those names out there, because you have no idea, like the whole process of interviewing these guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they were interviewing me. I'd come in and I'd say, okay, this is my plan. I think the Mets have a great core. I'd keep these guys. I'd make a recommendation to keep these other guys. What's your plan? Who would you like to hire as manager? Okay, well, this is the guy I'd like. This is the person I'd like a pitch coach. I mean, that's what happens during these interviews. Sometimes I think people don't understand, like, they have an idea of what they want before they go in the room.
Right.
Organization wise.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be a president of baseball operations, you're not going to pull a name out of a hat. You already have an idea of who you want. For instance, when Omar Minaya wanted to hire Rudy Jaramillo, he didn't want to hire Willie Randolph. He had no relationship with Willie Randolph. The two people that were in the mix were the three people were Terry Collins, Rudy Jaramillo, and Willie Randolph. Now, Collins was there because of Fred Wilpon, because he was friends with Sandy Koufax, and Sandy Koufax loved Terry. So, and Omar had also had a good relationship with Terry. Willie Randolph was somebody that, was in the mix because of he had a couple of opportunities, and he should have been the next, manager hire somewhere. And Omar wanted Rudy Jaramillo, the guy who at the time was the hitting coach for the Texas Rangers, that was really well respected in the game. And Omar thought that Rudy would be a really good person to recruit players, and really respected his baseball knowledge. But at the end of the day, Willie Randolph was the compromise candidate. So that's why there was stress from day one with Omar and Willie. And, you can't have that. You got to let the GM and the president of baseball operations pick their guy and then move forward. You don't want all that stress. I mean, yes, I would like the manager, if he doesn't like something, he could challenge the general manager, but do so in a respectful way, so that is a conversation and they figure it out.
Right.
Because the other way, when you have completely different philosophies and you're trying to, ass kiss the fans, I mean, it doesn't work. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't work. You got to figure out a way. You got to grow up. You got to figure out a way. Look at Bobby Valentine and Steve Phillips. They could not get along. And, because Bobby Valentine thought he was the smartest guy in the room. And Steve Phillips didn't hire Bobby Valentine. You know what I'm saying? Like, Bobby Valentine was there. He was the manager. Joe McIlvaine was the GM. And then they fired Joe McIlvaine, bring in Steve Phillips. And these guys who everybody thought they were friends, they were not friends. You can't have that. You got to have a hierarchy. You know, and you got to let, look at the Jets all these years with all those terrible decisions they make, because they get to coach the GM. Right, you know what I'm saying? You got to have it. You got to have.
Yeah.
And look, and sometimes even when you have all that, it doesn't work out. But you at least, your process still has to be sound. And more often than not, if you have a sound process, you'll be able to execute. You'll be able to execute it better, so that your end result is closer to the thing that you wanted, rather than the thing that somebody else wanted or somebody else wanted done. So. Yeah, it's a complicated. Everybody wants to just spit out names, I mean, look, there's plenty of guys I could see managing the team, but
we had Frankie. We had Frank Rodriguez. Sorry, Mark. We had Frank Rodriguez and Louis Lopez on, and they advocating for Eduardo Perez as the Mets manager.
I've heard Eduardo's name. It was connected the last time. Again, I mean, I don't know enough about Eduardo Perez. I mean, I know a lot about him as an analyst. I think he's, certainly can communicate with the media. But I have no connection to him. You know what I'm saying? Like I've never played for him.
Right.
I've never interacted with him. So for me, it's hard I don't like to do that. You know, I don't like to say yes or no to anybody if I have no connection. That doesn't mean he wouldn't be great. You know,
Right.
I know he was being looked at the last time.
Well, if the Mets hire you as the manager, I'll become a Met fan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know how my career might be over before it starts. But I appreciate that.
No
Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining the show, you did yourself a disservice. Tonight, our guest was gracious enough to give us all of his time, and I want to share this with everybody. The book is called Gotham Baseball, New York's all-time team, written by our guest, Mr. Mark C. Healey. He doesn't like me to address him as Mr. Healey, so he is our friend to the show, Mark. Mark, I want to say first and foremost, we appreciate your time. We were glad that you could come on. You're part of the family now, so if there's anything going on with you, an event, something you want to promote, you could always reach out. The platform is yours. First and foremost, and secondly, we have to have another discussion with
segment.
you. Yeah, we definitely have to have you on. So if you would make yourself available, we would really appreciate that.
Guys, I really enjoyed this. So anytime you want me, I'm here.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard that, right?
We got it on tape.
It's full on commitment.
You can't delete it like the tweets either, right? Mark, we thank you. Appreciate your time for real. This was fun, man. We could talk for hours here.
I can listen for hours.
Yeah,
this guy sharing all the backstories, and all the behind the scenes stuff.
You should do the audiobooks yourself with that voice.
That's reality. Do you get told that too, Mark? You got a face for radio? I get that. I get that all the time.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Healey. Mark, we're gonna tuck you away in the green room, close out the show, and then we'll speak to you behind the scenes. Thanks. If you got a moment.
Yeah, sure.
All right, wonderful.
I can hang out for a couple of minutes.
All right, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Mark Healey.
Thanks again, guys.
All right. Dude, that guy knows everything about.
Yeah, man.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, he was talking about that the other day. He needs his own show, for real. He definitely needs his own show.
Well, he made a post regarding that. He was like, I want to, and I'm like, man, start your own.
Yeah, man.
Fans will come.
For sure.
The guy has years of experience. And we're talking about, generations, like at least 2 or 3 generations.
For sure.
And the changes that the game has gone through and the evolution of the game. There's so much information there, if you would, right?
No, for sure.
And Frank Gogo was definitely going hard. I don't know if
he's a Met fan, so he loves it.
Like you said, is secretly a Mets fan.
Oh God.
Listen, I don't know about that. He's never been a Mets fan. In the 80s, we were
86 when they played the Red Sox. Hell yeah, because I hate the Red Sox.
Yeah, they had
when my boy Julio won the chip.
We were talking about that when we had Louis and Frank on, like the situation with the Mets. But it is what it is, man. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, come check us out next Wednesday. We're gonna have another very interesting guest from Brooklyn. We're gonna be talking about a very intense topic, but I think the subject matter is appropriate, 1, and 2, I think the conversation that we're ready to talk about is one that needs to be had. So we hope everybody could come join us. We thank you for joining us tonight for our first doubleheader. Selly, are we out of here?
Let's go. Thank you, everybody. If you like what you saw, please subscribe to the channel. The set 6145.
That's right. And we'll be seeing you next Wednesday. Let's go.